One of the variable conditions at play in congressional elections is whether it's a presidential year election or midterm year election. And I talked about the coattails effect very briefly when we were talking about sort of generally variable conditions. But it's important to remember that that's not the only thing that varies uh, when we're talking presidential versus midterm. Turnout is far lower in midterm years, at least since the rise of the second party system in 1820. And this is because people generally view the presidency as sort of the big one, the one they want to vote for, and they don't always care about bothering to vote in the midterm elections because there's no president on the ballot. So they just might not care as much. And as we've learned, presidential elections are so high information, there's so much money spent, there's so many ads aired, it's much easier for voters who may not care that much to get the information they need in order to go and vote. But in midterm elections where you don't have that big spending on the president and all those ads and all that for the president, you may not get the information to some of the voters who don't ordinarily pay that much attention. Now, as I've already hinted at, there is this coattails effect during presidential years. And Angus Campbell describes the sort of results of this in the surge and decline theory. So the presidential coattails are this wave of support for the president's party in presidential years. So the president, let's say we'll look at 2020, Biden won, he's a Democrat. So Democrats were elected along with Biden to serve in Congress. But in midterm years, we often think about it as a referendum on the president, right? We can't vote against the president because he's not up for re-election, but we can vote against his party and send a message that maybe he's not doing things we want. And we can sort of check his power by voting for his opposition party. So the president's party generally has their power in Congress decline. This does not mean that they always lose control of Congress. It just means that they lose seats in Congress. And in the past 18 midterm elections from World War II through 2017, the president's party actually lost about 25 seats in the House and 4 in the Senate. In the 19 total since World War II, the president's party has in fact lost seats in at least one chamber in 17 of those midterm elections. Now, this doesn't mean that the president's party will lose power, right? 25 seats may be smaller than the margin. And also that's an average. There were years that they lost fewer than 25 seats. So control doesn't always switch away from the president's party, but the president's party loses some power, some seats. And there are exceptions to this. After the September 11th attacks, that next midterm election in 2002, George W. Bush was president, he was a Republican, and more Republicans were voted into office. Why was that? Well, basically because there was this whole big crisis moment and people really wanted to support the president and make sure he had the power he needed to get things done to keep the country safe. The other exception was during Clinton's presidency, his second midterm election in 1998, so just one midterm before 2002, he also gained seats. The Democrats gained seats. This was really a response to the Republicans led by Newt Gingrich and their sort of obsession in Congress with impeaching and removing Clinton from power. And people were just like, no, we've had enough of this. We want to get on with the business of governing and getting stuff done. So they ultimately sort of made that midterm election a referendum on what the Republicans in Congress were doing rather than on the president, as is typical. Now, if you're Angus Campbell, you probably looked at these two midterm elections like, eek, 1998, 2002, both of these are not declining the way the surge and decline theory would predict. We got to rethink things. But those seem to be anomalies because it has now continued that every midterm since those two, we have seen a decline in the president's party's power in Congress.